Thank you once again for your practice. There are now 62 of us here in the East Bay Meditation Center People of Color Sangha on the evening of the 16th of December in the year 2021. My name is Mushim Patricia Ikeda. Mushim is a Korean Buddhist name that I received in 1983, May of 1983, in Toronto, Canada, in the Zen Buddhist Temple. I started my Buddhist training in the Zen Buddhist Temple of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I am a United Statesian or an American, and our mother temple was up in Toronto. So we went up to Toronto in May of that year, and I received the Bodhisattva vows and precepts and was given the name Mushim. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am located on the Lishan Ohlone land, the unceded land of the Confederated Villages of the Lishan, and conventionally known as Oakland, California, here in the United States. Once again, today is the 16th of December in the year 2021, and I want to recognize that yesterday, on December 15th, Bell Hooks, beloved and brilliant author and teacher, died at the age of 69 at her home in Berea, Kentucky. This is a quote from Bell Hooks, which was published in Lion's Roar Buddhist Media. That's lionsroar.com, I think, from an article published by Bell Hooks in June of this year, titled Toward a Worldwide Culture of Love. And those of us familiar with Bell Hooks' work know very well that she wrote a lot, she talked a lot on true love. Bell Hooks said this: we need concrete strategies. So you notice this is not about like vague romantic feelings. It's kind of the opposite. We need concrete strategies for practicing love in the midst of domination. Imagine all that would change for the better if every community in our nation had a center, a Sangha, that would focus on the practice of love, of loving kindness. End of quote. So therefore, I turn it over to you, dear Sangha, and ask, what in this moment can we imagine? As human beings, we've got these kind of incredible brains, and we have the ability to imagine things. What can we imagine, envision, vision, that would change the world for the better? Through establishing communities that focus on the practice of love and of loving kindness. And just notice if anything is coming up for you. As one of my best friend from undergraduate college says, between us, we make a full brain. So you can think of it and imagine things that I can't, and I can imagine and think of things that you can't. And together, it's together as a community that we can come up with what we need. That's how East Bay Meditation Center was formed. Bell Hooks also wrote about her geographic identity, interestingly enough. She taught at Berea College, Berea College in Kentucky. And she says this: living by those values, living with integrity, I am able to return to my native place, to an Appalachia that is no longer silent about its diversity or about the broad sweep of its influence. While I do not claim an identity as Appalachian, Bell Hooks says, I do claim a solidarity, a sense of belonging that makes me one with the Appalachian past of my ancestors, Black, Native American, white, all, quote, people of one blood, unquote, who made home place. That's an interesting thing. She writes one word, home place, who made home place in isolated landscapes where they could invent themselves, where they could savor a taste of freedom. And that's a quote from a piece of writing by Bell Hooks from News One and the Black News section of News One. That's one word, Newsone. I found that online. And I find that's very interesting when we think in terms of identity and what some of us, myself included, see and feel, experience as the fluid nature of identity. So here we see Bell Hooks really claiming for herself a solidarity with those who identify as Appalachian. That's a name of the mountains down there that extend into Kentucky. So she said she claims a solidarity and a sense of belonging. For all people who made home place in isolated landscapes where they could invent themselves. Many of us have experienced isolation in so many different ways during this pandemic and far before it. How is it that we can touch the roots and our roots in order to invent ourselves and savor a taste of freedom? These words could actually apply to my entire spiritual career, as it were, since 1982, when I began doing Zen meditation in the Korean North American tradition in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was looking to reinvent myself in a city. It was Ann Arbor. I felt very isolated there. I didn't really fit in very well, actually. And I was in my late 20s and at a turning point in my life where I was very confused and I only knew one thing, that I needed something better. I needed to find, I couldn't have put it this way at the time, but I needed to find a path to liberation, spiritual liberation. I understood very clearly that the training I'd had, the various degrees I had, were not in areas that I disliked in any way, but they would not support me. Ultimately, I knew that clearly. For me to be able to find within myself enough resolution to the deepest existential questions of human life. What is my purpose? Why is there so much suffering in the world? What can I do about it? How can I be happy? What is real happiness? And what leads to happiness? For whatever reason, I just had gotten to the place where those were the only questions that mattered to me. In other words, I was a complete mess. And that's how the spiritual path goes. It's not all, I don't know, some people think it's like this serene, wonderful thing. It is very messy. It's deeply weird and messy, and that's okay. And that's okay. So rest in power, bell hooks. Your legacy lives on. And once again, in light of where we are in the year, the cycle of the seasons, today is the 16th of December. We're proceeding rapidly towards December 21st, the winter solstice, where we have the shortest number of hours of daylight during the day. And then there's that interesting tipping point, and we begin to build up the amount of daylight during the day as we move toward the summer. We move past the spring equinox into the summer solstice next summer, when the amount of daylight will be the longest. So we're heading towards the return of the light. And this talk is titled Return of the Light. What's the most important thing? We've now gone through 2 years of global pandemic. What is it that at this point lights the way for each of us, and collectively for us as Black, Indigenous people of color, meditation practitioners, and agents of change? When we consider our time, our money, our life energies, what is the most important thing for us to do as we enter into the year 2022 and beyond? That's the question that I gently offer to each of us as individuals and also as collectives. Considering our resources and our capacities and our sustainability, what's the most important thing right now? There's, in the meditation world, as in many other circles, there are certain words and phrases that become kind of the buzzwords, and they come and go. And there's excitement, and then there's usually like backlash. and then it begins to morph and change, and that's normal. So right now I'm noticing that the word embodiment is the word du jour. And it's a very good word. However, it annoys me incredibly. And while it annoys me, it's obviously very important. That's why it keeps coming up. And what's important that I do agree with is the message that as human beings, we aren't talking heads just floating around. At least I'm not. And what's happening in our body minds as at this moment, it's very, very important to be in touch with it for our own safety, our own health, our own well-being, for lots, so we just don't bump into furniture and things like that. And I don't know about you, the pandemic for me has caused a lot of mental fogginess. I'm exhausted, inability to concentrate. And what I notice, I rarely go out, but when I do, things are weird out there. So today I went for an acupuncture appointment in the late afternoon to Oakland Kaiser. And I was parked in this parking lot, like 3 blocks away in the back of the CVS pharmacy. So I came back and I was heading toward my car, and there was a person who shouted towards another person in this really sharp, hostile voice, and just, "What are you doing?" And the other person said, "I'm getting into my car." And the first person said, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were breaking into my car." And then that person went to their car, which was an entirely different area of the parking lot. Just another one of those tales of the pandemic. And I notice things like that all the time when I go out. So I'm not the only one who's confused. Okay. So embodiment to me means awareness of body sensations, awareness of how we're moving our body in relationship to the objects in the space around us, and awareness of how well we're regulating and maintaining our bodies for optimum well-being. That's what it means to me. And one of the ways, many ways in which the news of Bell Hook's death affected me is that she was only 69, and I'm turning 68 in a few days. So I thought, holy smokes, I better make this next year count for everything that it can. And I come from the generation of women in the United States who in the 70s and early 80s, at least some of us, were reading the foundational manual from, I think, the Boston Women's Collective, which was a guide to women's health called Our Bodies, Ourselves. And I still have a copy, I think, of the updated edition around somewhere. It was a great book, and it, again, as the title indicated, that as we reclaim our bodies and our health and our right to access for health, that we reclaim ourselves in the best sense of the word. We reclaim ourselves as empowered, as powerful beings who, through sovereignty over our own bodies and our processes, can better direct our lives towards our goals. And I would say this applies to everyone, including children. In Vipassana meditation, which we've just done, what's called the first foundation or establishment of mindfulness. This is from the well-known Buddhist text, the Satipatthana Sutta, which is translated as the 4 foundations or the 4 establishments of mindfulness. The first foundation is what we've just practiced: awareness of body sensations, awareness of physical sensations. We know now that this needs to be trauma-informed, disability and access informed, and it's super important. It's super, super important in my point of view. As I said, I mean, just in a common sense way. We're moving around in spaces where we may be driving, just being aware of safety on the street and all kinds of things. It's important to have body awareness. This is not a particularly religious thing. As someone who's worked with a lot of kids and children, really, really just basically important, as well as our personal boundaries and keeping ourselves safe. So as we move towards, in a few days, our winter solstice, a time when many people are very affected by the short number of daylight hours, perhaps resulting in what's called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, depression that's brought on by the short amount of daylight. We might turn our meditation towards contemplation of also the rhythms of the body. In fact, the natural rhythms of the body that are, in my understanding, that these rhythms of the body evolved in response to the natural cycles of light and dark over the course of the year, and perhaps wonder what it might be like to try out a different rhythm than what modern society tries to establish as the norm. At the end of October 31st, 2009, in The Guardian, there was an essay called Why I Adore the Night by Jeanette Winterson. Winterson writes, "We now live in a fast-moving, fully lit world where night still happens but is optional to experience." Where night is optional to experience. Our 24/7 culture has phased out the night. In fact, we treat the night like failed daylight. Yet slowness and silence, the different rhythm of the night, are a necessary correction to the day. Winterson goes on to say, "I think we should stop being night resistors and learn to celebrate the changes of the seasons and realign ourselves to autumn and winter. Not just turn up the heating, leave the lights on, and moan a lot. Night and dark are good for us. As the nights lengthen, it's time to reopen the dreaming space." Have you ever spent an evening without electric light? Again, going back, this is me, to my original Zen Buddhist training at the Zen Buddhist Temple of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We would do regular meditation retreats. And the most strenuous one of the year was in the beginning of December. Celebrating what on the Japanese Buddhist calendar is called Rohatsu, which is December 8th, and it's then that they celebrate the enlightenment of the historical Buddha, the Buddha Shakyamuni, known as Siddhartha Gautama, before his enlightenment. So there are a lot of meditation retreats going on leading up to December 8th in some countries, not all countries. And it's considered to be the time where you go for it. You just pour everything into your practice and you go for it. You go for it. And so, of course, this was the Midwest. It was Michigan. It was really cold. It was really cold. We didn't have a lot of heating in the temple. And during retreats, we didn't use any electric lights. The temple would be lit, and very dimly, by kerosene lamps, which of course you had to be very mindful about so as not to cause a fire. And there would be like candles, a few candles on the altar in the meditation hall. It was like so dark. I have very poor night sight. It was really, 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 really dark. And the light of the candles and the kerosene lamp was so beautiful. I mean, we weren't reading or anything like that. We were just meditating and moving mindfully around. And it created a whole different rhythm, a whole different relationship to one another. It felt cozy. It was just wonderful. I can still remember that feeling. And as Winterson says, it's time to reopen the dreaming space. It's a protected environment. It's a deep, slow rhythm. Some animals go into hibernation. And we're reopening the parts of the brain that imagine, that dream, that bring into being new worlds. There's always at least two sides of things. So I do want to acknowledge if the lessened amount of daylight is affecting you, it does affect me. If you see sunshine, please head for it and soak it up. One Buddhist monk also said that while meditating with eyes closed, you can visualize a bright light to promote alertness. I have in the past used a full spectrum light therapy box for light therapy at this time of year as well, and it really does help. So like so many other things, this is a both and. It's in praise of winter darkness, and it's also saying, if it's not helpful to us, bring in some more light. All of which points to how much can we hold? How big can our hearts and minds grow? In Buddhism, we don't say hearts and minds. We say heart-mind as one word, not two, but one. So I invite us to individually and as a community and as many communities to consider at this point, with all that we're facing, the climate crisis, the global pandemic, what's happening in our political situation, in the economic situations, we are now so interconnected through global economies, to ask ourselves, what is the most important thing to which we need to turn our valuable and our impermanent life energies? I don't know how much longer I have to live. I just know I am in the end zone of my life, one way or another. So the question I ask myself every morning when I wake up is, well, so Mushim, for yourself, what is the most important thing? It might be calling a friend whom I haven't talked to for a while. It's not always the most predictable thing when we again engage our full selves in order to reopen that dreaming space where intuitive and spiritual connections are made. Where, as one poet, I think, said, we listen to news from the universe. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I'm developing it as a theme in my practice. What is the most important thing? If we made that into an acronym, it's WITMIT, W-I-T-M-I-T. And I have been trained in what's called koan, K-O-A-N practice, which is when we raise a meditation question to ourselves, keep it in our consciousness day and night, night and day. And so that's my koan to share with you. What is the most important thing? I can't answer that question for you, by the way. This is your question if you'd like to take it up. So I invite you into this practice over the winter solstice, into the new year, 2022, by that way of counting, and over the Lunar New Year in 2022, which is Tuesday, February 1st, when we enter the year of the tiger and leave the year of the ox, if what I found online is correct. What is the most important thing? So I'm going to ask for one of our volunteers to share a slide. And this was from a chart paper. Remember those days when we had chart paper when we got together in person on an easel? So I loved my colored markers. So this was from Practice in Transformative Action in October of 2019, before the global pandemic. And I asked, these were meditation questions. What does resistance to dominator structures look and feel like to you? What are mindful affection, mindful affinity, mindful solidarity, and mindful revolt? The reason I'm asking this is not because I know, it's because I hope that you know, and that together we will be able to bring forth new initiatives, new visions, new strategies by opening this dreaming space, this vital dreaming space for all of us as Black, Indigenous people of color, inviting our white allies in as is appropriate, and asking, how is it that imperfectly in the next year, in the period before us, we can realize and demonstrate and manifest mindful affection, affinity, solidarity, and revolt? Thank you. If you could finish sharing the slide. So once again, I saw on the internet, we're entering the year of the tiger. My original teacher, a Korean Zen monk, once said, what is the difference? And there used to be tigers in Korea. Some people, of course, the Koreans call them Korean tigers. Non-Koreans, I guess in Russia, call them Siberian tigers, but it's the same animal. And I just saw online that the last Korean tiger was hunted and killed in 1922. They are extinct. Much beloved in Korean art. So my original teacher, a Korean Zen master, once said, what is the difference between a tiger and a dog? And he answered, if you throw a crumb at a dog, the dog leaps on the crumb. If you throw a crumb at a tiger, the tiger leaps on the person. So, something to consider. I've been with this People of Color Sangha for 14 years now. And this is the last time that I'll speak to all of you in the year 2021. Let's make the year 2022 the year of Black, Indigenous people of color liberation, sustainability, joy, and let's roar like tigers. Now, thank you so much. And we do have a little bit of time for community sharing. If you have something to share, a question or an insight, please.
Can you speak to how we speak to love in the educational, organizational, and activist setting? I think speak about love maybe is what they meant.
Educational, organizational, and activist settings. Please take a moment and right now there's so much great information online, and has been for a while, of bell hooks, again, writing about love. Is very, very powerful. It's very much in alignment with the Buddhist understanding, I would say, or understandings of what we call love. And we're not talking here about romantic love or bonding or attachment between two or more people in terms of, again, like romantic involvement. So we're talking about love in the sense of loving kindness, in the Buddhist sense, metta, M-E-T-T-A is the Pali word for it. We're talking about agape in the Christian sense. And we're talking about love that we don't even need to use the word. We could, that's the skill of it, is to adapt it for the people that we're talking to. Educational setting, like a school, I guess, or a university, an organizational setting. And it really has to do, I think, with the willingness. Is there willingness present for people to talk in mindful and honest ways about the power structures in whatever setting we're in, which might be resulting in power over instead of power with, and in power abuses, which cause some people to suffer and some people to benefit at the expense of others. In this meaning of the word, then we could say that love is about justice. And the word justice to us in English might come across as kind of cold and legal and technical. This is not cold or legal or technical. It's about our relationships to one another as human beings and our willingness to become aware that we might be benefiting from others' oppression and suffering. And if we're on the oppressed and suffering end, we know damn well that others are benefiting from our labor and are being pushed down. So then how do we practice love in that situation, which becomes empowered love to lift up our communities and ourselves? So that's what I would say that love in those situations looks like. The dedication of merit in the Buddhist sense, in my understanding, means kind of like goodness, like we rack up points. And so I kind of a teaching this idea like we're racking up points by doing good works. And that having been said, because Buddhists also believe that hoarding things is not helpful, what do we do when we rack up these points? We instantly give them away. We're going to instantly share them and multiply the benefit, actually, by dedicating. If we have done anything good together and generated any goodness, which I believe we have, but if we have, then let's instantly give it away by bringing to mind at least one being, one living being, group of beings, part of the environment. It's totally up to you that you would like to dedicate our collective goodness towards the wholesomeness, the life-giving qualities of our practice. What being or beings would you like to dedicate it to right now? And visualize that being or that whatever you're visualizing, just really clearly in your mind. Bring it forward. Right now, it's the most important thing. And imagine and visualize that all of the goodness that we have generated is streaming out like light or whatever you'd like to visualize it as flower petals, as just yummy goodness toward this being or these living beings that are suffering. In the words of the great teacher, Shantideva, from the Dedication of Merit section at the end of the great work, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the Bodhicharyavatara, it is said, may all beings everywhere plagued with sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of our merits. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food, may the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. It always kind of cracks me up, delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, and those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find new hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting one another. As you travel forth from this Zoom gathering, may all travelers find happiness everywhere you go, and without any effort may you accomplish whatever you have set out to do. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain. Until then, may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Please be well, be safe. May each and every one of you be happy. Thank you.